Hello everyone, let's talk about list in this lecture. A list is a collection of items such as numbers or strings. This slide shows you an example of a list. I put 6 numbers together into a group. Then this group is called a list. If I give this list to a variable, then basically I created a list type variable in Python. Creating a list is pretty simple in Python, but when we create a list, we must follow certain formats. First, we must include all items of a list by 2 square brackets. As you can see here, 2 square brackets. We must include all items of a list by these 2 symbols. Second, we must separate items of a list by commas, as you can see on this slide. We must separate each item in a list by a comma. These are 2 important rules we must follow when we create a list. Sometimes we could have several items in a list. We got to give them a name. We call each item in a list an element of this list. So on this slide, I have 6 items in the list. Then basically I have 6 elements of this list. Even though a list is a group of numbers or strings, we can access to each element one by one. If we want to access to a particular value in a list, then we can use the position of that element to access to the value of that element. For instance, I created a list type variable called myList. If I want to access to the number 303 in this list, then I can use myList starting bracket 0 and then the ending bracket to access to element 303. In this case, number 0 represents the position of element 303 in the list. Some classmates may ask, since element 303 is the first element in the list, why don't you use 1 to represent the position of element 303? Remember, the position of the first element in any list should be 0. Therefore, the position of the second element should be 1. The position of the third element in a list should be 2, and so on and so forth. Here I have a question for everyone. If I want to access to the element 30, what should I do? Because 30 is the number 6 element in the list, so I should use myList bracket 5, which is the position of the 6th element in the list, and then the ending bracket to access to the element 30 in this case. This is how you access to each element in a list by using its position. We just talked about some lists with numerical elements. What if we want to create a list with string elements? What should we do? When we create a list with string elements, the general formats of the list should be the same. All items must be included by 2 square brackets, as you can see on this slide. All the car brands must be included by 2 square brackets. Second, all elements in the list must be separated by commas, as you can see in this slide. There is a special rule when you create a list with string elements. That is, each string element in a list must be included by 2 single quotes, as you can see on this slide. Each car brand must be included by 2 single quotes. This is a special rule when you create a list with string elements. After we created a list, we can use the predefined functions to add a new element into the list or remove an element from the list. If we want to add a new element to the end of the list, we can use the append function. This slide shows everybody how to use the append function. First, we created a list type variable. It's called a car branch. It got 5 elements in the list. If we want to add a new element to the end of this list, and the element value is Mercedes, then we can use car branch, dot operator, append, and then Mercedes. Here you need to pay attention. If you want to add a string element, you still need to include the element by 2 single quotes when you use the append function. After we executed the 2 statements, we will get a new list as shown on this slide. As you can see here, Mercedes is the last element in the new list. Some classmates may say, I don't want to add Mercedes to the end of the new list. I want to add Mercedes as the second element in the new list. What should I do? We can use the insert function. The purpose of the insert function is to insert a new element into a specific position in a list. For instance, if we want to add Mercedes as the second element in the new list, then we can use car branch, dot operator, insert 1, which is the second element in the new list, and then we give Mercedes as the value of the new second element in the list. After we execute these 2 statements, we can get a new list like the one showed on this slide. As you can see here, Mercedes is the second element in the new list. If we want to delete some elements from a list, we can use the remove function. The remove function will delete an element with a specific value from the list. For instance, if we want to remove Honda from the list, then we can use car branch dot remove. Between the parentheses, we indicate Honda. This means we want to remove Honda from the old list. After we execute these 2 statements, we'll get a new list like the one on this slide. In this new list, we don't have a Honda element anymore. We can also delete some element by its position. We can use the del function. This slide shows everyone the format of using the del function to remove the elements from a list. First, we want to access to the element we want to remove. We want to remove Honda and Kia from the list. Then we use their position 0 and 1 to access to the elements. And then before the 2 elements, we add a del function. After we execute these statements, we'll get a new list without Honda and Kia. This is how we create and use lists in Python.